Well, hey guys, thanks for coming out today. My name is Brandon Rice, and that's me right there, and that's me right here. I've been a filmmaker for over 16 years. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really excited about this year's conference. I don't know, I keep getting confused if yesterday was the first day, today, I don't know, but either way, I'm excited about the conference. Anyway, I was here last year also talking about filmmaking, and I'm really excited about being here again to really talk about something I'm passionate about, which is wedding filmmaking. Before we get much further, I'm gonna actually go ahead and show you a film that I shot last September, just to get you familiar with some of my work before we kind of dive into it. So here you go.
These past 3 years have gone by so fast. It seems like just the other day we were meeting at Waterman's and sharing our first kiss. Look at us now. The day is finally here, and I'm excited.
Marriage deepens and enriches every facet of life.
Tommy, a lifetime of words cannot possibly explain how happy I am in this moment to become your future wife. I would have never imagined in my wildest dreams that I could meet a man like you, a man who makes me feel beautiful, appreciated, special, and most importantly, loved every single day unconditionally.
I choose you. I choose you to be my wife, my best friend, lifelong partner, and rock-solid foundation on which to build our family.
This is the best day of my life. I've dreamt about this moment and this day for a very long time, but for a very long time I didn't know if it would ever happen for me. And then 3 years ago, you came into my life and changed my world forever. As your wife, I vow to be your best friend, your lover, the best mother to our children, and your partner in life. I promise to always laugh with you, dance with you, cheer on the Vikings with you, to respect you and be faithful to you. And I even promise to let you win at Gin Rummy sometimes. And maybe shuffleboard. Thomas Chunley, you are the man of my dreams, and our story is my favorite story because you are in it.
I need you to know that I will respect and cherish you. I will be your support and strength when you need it most. I will help you love life. I will grow with you and laugh with you. I will believe in you. I will be a loving, patient, and caring husband, and God willing, as a father also. And most importantly, I will love you and no other through sickness and health, for better and most certainly for worse, till death do us part.
They will cherish the words they have shared today and the support you've given them tonight. But we really cannot make this official unless I have all of you here affirm the marriage. Repeat after me. We, your friends, now pronounce you married.
We, your friends, now pronounce you married.
You may seal this declaration with a kiss. I am pleased to present to you Mr. and Mrs. Tommy and Kelly Lee.
Tommy is a person who we should all strive to be like. For years, I felt so guilty because I knew while I was going on dates and having fun, I was like, I'm not even half the guy that this guy is. I need to get somebody for Tommy Lee. It was a long quest for Tommy because he was the real, authentic, nice guy. My brother, the person that I know I can count on, that each and every one of you can count on. Most importantly, Kelly, that you can count on for the rest of your entire days as you build your family. You have the best foundation. And in this tough Southern California real estate market, that's a hell of a place to start right there. Raise your glasses and toast the amazing Mrs. Lee, Kelly, the soulmate, the true completion of the circle that is the Lee family. Toast to the best man that I know on this planet. I'm the designated best man today, but Tommy Lee, you are the best man. Cheers.
I got a text from Tommy. He wanted to meet me at Starbucks. He wanted to talk to me. When he said, do you realize why we're here? And I said, yeah, I've been praying at least a month, maybe 2 months. I think you're going to pop the question. Is that right, Tommy? I'm going to ask you to marry my daughter. And I said, with pleasure.
Kelly is one of the most undecisive people I've ever met. Anyone has gone to dinner with her, you know exactly what I'm talking about. She'll look over a menu for 30 minutes. She'll ask the waiter to come back 3 times, and she'll still want to be the last person to place her order. But the truth is when she met Tommy, that was probably the quickest decision she ever made, that he was the one for her.
Kelly and Tommy, we are so happy for you. You are a perfect, perfect match. We love you so much. Cheers to our happy newlyweds.
So there you go. Thank you. So now some of you might be intrigued by this title that I have on this class today, From Wedding Videographer to Wedding Filmmaker. Well, I want to give you a little backstory on that. A year ago at this very conference, literally a year ago, I was having a discussion with 2 colleagues of mine, and they've become really good friends, Larry Marshall and Charlie Hilbrand. And Charlie's actually on the judges panel for the filmmaking competition, which is really cool this year. They're both brilliant filmmakers. And I was talking to them, and I was explaining that we needed a shift in our industry. I feel like video, for the most part, is looked on like an add-on to photography. A lot of times people come in a month or 2 before the wedding with $500 and say, hey, I need a wedding video. And it's just really kind of a shame that video is looked at that way. And I said, one of the biggest things that we need to stop doing is calling ourselves videographers. I said, we need to start calling ourselves filmmakers. And Larry kind of looked over at me and said, well, like, what's the difference? I quickly, off the top of my head, gave him a few answers. None of them were that substantial. But I've been sitting with that question this whole year, really, and just kind of thinking about it, thinking through it. What is the difference? Because I know there's a difference, and I think that this difference is something that is going to really change how people not only view what we do, but also how we view what we do as well. I think that this distinction is really important. Before I go further, I kind of want to get a feel for the room. How many of you have ever shot video before? Raise your hands. Okay, so most of you, cool. How many of you is video like your primary thing? Okay, cool, about half of you guys. Awesome. How many of you come from like a photography background, even if video is your primary thing now? Raise your hands. Okay, cool, awesome, good deal. That's great. The first question we need to ask ourselves is, what is the difference between a videographer and a filmmaker? I think that's the first thing that we need to ask. And I think the best thing to do is actually find the definition of video. So I went to Webster's Dictionary, which is helpful sometimes when you're researching a class and words. And I looked up the definition. And it says it's the recording, reproducing, or broadcasting of moving visual images, which I don't know about you guys, but like that's basically like you can just pull your phone out and shoot a video. I mean, that's not what we should be doing, I don't think. I think if what we're doing stops there, then we've missed something. Because that's just the medium, that's not actually what we're creating. So then the next thing I did is I said, well, let's find out what a film is, since I'm so passionate about us being called filmmakers. So the first definition I found was like, a strip of film, which I don't know if any of you who are shooting video full-time are shooting on film. Is anyone shooting on film? I didn't think so. It's way too expensive. Most movies aren't even shot on film anymore, so it wouldn't make much sense for us to do that either. So the second definition was actually the one that I went with, which is a motion picture or a movie. And I feel like this is much more fitting to what we're doing, I hope. Because, it's not just a video that we're producing. We're producing something that has a story. We're producing something that has sound design, audio, sound effects, editing, transitions. We're not simply shooting something and then just handing that off to a client. At least not most of us are. So I think that was much more important and kind of a good distinction. And this kind of brings me to like what my background is, which is actually not weddings at all. My background is actually in shooting narrative short films and feature films. There's some young versions of me, very young versions of me. I shot a couple movies that got distributed by Lionsgate. So that's kind of my background is in the production side. And I always kind of wonder, well, why do we treat weddings differently than we treat movies? Because, this is my background, this is where I come from. And so as I was kind of thinking about this, I wanted to kind of hone in on a big idea from my master class last year that some of you may remember, which was story is what matters most. I think no matter what you're doing, especially in a film, we looked at that definition. It says a movie, a motion picture. And what is the most important thing of a movie? For me, it's the story. I mean, it could look really pretty, but if it's a flat story, I'm not interested. So I think story is still what matters most, regardless of what we're doing. This is one of the things that we wanted to talk about. And now, how do we get to the story? Because that's the thing that we're looking for, right? Like, we could go out, and I was just at the filmmaking judging, and a lot of times I was, seeing all these visuals that were beautiful, and I didn't know what was happening, in some of these films. They were fantastic, but I see that so often in our industry where it's just like shot after shot after shot of really pretty stuff. But there's nothing that's pulling me in, nothing engaging me. And I think we need to look actually at the film industry to see what they do and see how it can mirror what we do. The first process in any movie is going to be the pre-production, which simply means before production, On a movie, this is where you're going to be creating your shot list of the shots you need for each scene. You're going to be reviewing your script. You're going to be auditioning and casting actors and actresses. This is your planning phase, and this is one of the most important phases on a movie production. Sometimes this phase can actually last longer than the entire rest of the production. I've been on many movies where this phase was, lasted over a year for a movie that we were making. So this is one of those phases that I think can't be overlooked, having a really good plan going into it. I think with films, wedding films, this is the same thing. I mean, if we're gonna tell a story, how are we gonna do this without knowing who the couple is? Are they a daredevil, adventure-loving, rock-climbing couple? Or are they like a romantic, getting a cabin in the mountains but not getting out to the mountains couple, Like, how are we gonna find that out if we don't have a good plan? So here's some things that I think really help me as I'm in this pre-production phase to really get to know my couple and start to get to know the story. One of the first things that's really important to me is social media. We live in a day and age where we literally have a window into people's lives. I don't always know how I feel about that, but if we can use that to our advantage as we're creating these films, I think that's really awesome. So as soon as I book a client, if they're on either Facebook or Instagram, which 90% of people are gonna be on one of those two things, I hop on there, I follow them, I'll friend them on Facebook, because this is gonna start giving me a window into their lives. Who are the people that are important to them? What are the things that are important to them? What type of couple is it? Are they the adventure couple? Are they the more, mushy romantic couple? Are they a blend of the two? So this is really important to me. For instance, I don't know if you guys saw in that opening montage when you walked in, there was a shot of a bride who, her dog was standing next to her while she was getting into her dress. I had followed her about a year before her wedding and found out that their previous dog had passed away from cancer, and it was really hard for the family. And they had adopted this new dog, and they had just fallen in love with it, especially the bride. And so during the day, as she was getting ready, this dog was very involved. She was running around, she was in pictures. And so as soon as, she's standing there next to the bride, I'm like, I've got to get a shot of this sweet dog looking up at her. And when the bride saw that, she just flipped out. And I don't know, had I not followed her on social media and really invested in getting to know her that way, had I even would have recognized that that was something that was happening. So again, I think that's a really important thing. I think it gives us a window into these people's lives. And most people are very open on their social media about their friends and family and who is close to them. So I think that's really important. The next thing is the meeting. Some people call this a consult, but I don't really like that wording, only because usually that's like prior to the booking. I don't really do like a deep meeting prior to the booking unless they just have specific questions. I don't ask a lot of questions of the couple before they book me. They can ask me as many questions as they want, but I kind of wait to get to know them a little better before I start diving into who they are and kind of asking questions. So this is important for so many reasons. Not only do you get to know the couple and their story, but you also get a chance to sit down with them. Usually I try to do this over Skype or in person if I can. Sometimes on the phone, it's not as good on the phone, but you can still get a feel. You get a feel not only for their chemistry and who they are as a couple, but also start to get comfortable with them. Because again, you're building a relationship with these people. It's not just, you don't want to just treat them like another number, especially if you're trying to elevate your work and really, create something unique for each person. So I really ask them a lot of questions. Sometimes I write down notes. If we're in mid-session, I'll pull my phone up and be like, hey, I promise I'm not on social media. I'm writing down notes, And that's really, really helpful. I'll give you an example of this. At a consult a couple years ago, this couple told me that they were both worship pastors at their church and that they were going to incorporate that into their ceremony. So that actually helped me a lot because not only did I know ahead of time this was going to happen at the ceremony, I was prepared for it to shoot it that way, but I also was able to incorporate it into their edit. So again, this planning process really affects the entire project from start to finish. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys how that turned out.
Father, we thank you so much for Jason and Erica as promises are given. Lord, we pray that you would be in it all from beginning to end, and let all of the promises of the covenant come upon them.
You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are.
So that just gives you an idea of why meeting is so important, or phone calls or Skype calls. Would I have been able to shoot that, even just on the fly? Yeah, but being able to know that was going to happen, and even hearing from the couple about how important that was to them really affected how I kind of created their film. And that was when they saw that, they were just super excited about it. So another thing that I do as well, and this is another thing, I feel like really touching base with your couple throughout the course of this pre-production process is really important. And this is called the reminder. And this is an email I send out about 3 months before the wedding. And basically this is kind of I call it my tips email, and I'll show you it actually. There it is. This is like the exact wording. You can take a picture of it if you want. You can use the exact wording if you want. It's all good. Basically, I just kind of go through letters, romantic session, personal vows, toast, speeches. So again, like this is not a typical movie where you have a script. You don't know what you're getting when you go out there. So basically, you can only create a film with what they give you. So really, it's important to remind them that, early on. I've been doing this for a long time, and actually a bride from last year, she booked me about a year before her wedding, and she said to me, really love your work. We're just not like into hearing us on screen. Like, we may or may not do speeches. Could we do like just more like music based and stuff? And I'm like, that's fine. I'll probably use, some bits from your officiant because I really like to have audio in your films and stuff. She's like, that's fine, whatever. So this actually goes back to my social media comment because I followed her and she followed me back on Instagram, and she started watching my work throughout the course of the year. And by the time she got this email, she replies back and says, we've changed our minds. We want to do letters. We want to do personal vows. We want to do speeches. So I really think this email is a powerful thing. And whether you do it like this way or some other way, definitely touching base with them ahead of time and, just going through this stuff I think it's super important. So I would definitely recommend that. Another thing that has been invaluable to me during this pre-production planning process has been the questionnaire. I know some others do this as well. I've been doing it, for a very long time, and I shoot this out to them 2 to 2.5 months before the wedding. This is something that really gives me not only like logistical information, but again, like story stuff that really helps me. I'll give you an example of this. Here's my questionnaire and kind of how it looks. It's very, there's a lot of just logistical stuff that isn't even going to necessarily affect the story, but it just helps me know and have a plan ahead of time. There's something in the film industry called the call sheet, which is, where usually the unit production manager will send that out ahead of time before your call, and it'll show you your call time, the address you're going to, the scenes you're shooting that day and stuff like that. So it gives you all this information broken down. So this is kind of like my call sheet for their wedding. That's kind of how I like to look at it. And it gives you a lot of information logistically, but it also gives you stuff that can help you in the story. For instance, on this one, if you see there to the right, it says Chelsea's brother Bryce will play a violin solo. I really try to take a good amount of time and read through these really carefully, because something like that might go unnoticed. In fact, this bride and groom, I didn't even have a chance to do a meeting with them because they were living in New York. Their wedding was in Chattanooga. I was coming in from Nashville, so it was like, all this stuff, and they were just really busy. So really the questionnaire was all that I had to go off of for their wedding. But the cool thing is I was prepared as soon as I got to their reception, and even beforehand, to be able to shoot this solo and then incorporate it into their film. So yeah, that was really helpful. And even the style I shot that in, actually, because I knew he was going to do this, I was actually watching him rehearse it during the morning, and I noticed it was a very kind of aggressive like style of the way he was playing the violin. So I actually shot it handheld because it kind of worked with that style instead of on a gimbal or something, or locked down on a tripod. So again, I think that questionnaire is so helpful. Like, having a good plan ahead of time. It's going to not only save you in terms of logistically, getting the right address to the venue, but also it's going to really help your story a lot. I think that's important. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next phase, which I'm sure y'all can guess what it is, production. So in a theatrical film process, the production part is, of course, where you get on set and everything is lit and you've got the actors there, and you've got the director there, and he's yelling, action. Of course, I don't necessarily recommend you yelling action at your couples. They might freak out a little bit. But this is basically where you're acquiring all of the content which is going to create your film. Of course, what's the exact same thing as our production? Our production is the wedding, or maybe it's a pre-shoot before the wedding and then the wedding, or rehearsal and then the wedding. But either way, that's when production starts. One of the things I think we can really kind of take from the narrative theatrical film way that they do production is the characters. I love kind of breaking down my films like a movie. Like, your couple is the main character, and then you have secondary characters as well. So that's really something that I hone in on. I try to shoot as much coverage as I can of the couple together, especially because they're your leads, they're your main characters. Then the family members, a lot of times, are your secondary characters, kind of your supporting cast, and then the bridal party, of course. And then after that, it's everyone else. They're your day players, as you would say in the film industry, the ones that kind of, have a few shots here and there. But that's kind of how I break it down, not only when I'm shooting, but also when I'm editing. So I think that's something that really is important to think through as you're shooting your weddings. Another thing that I think, this is huge, this is something that I think will really set you apart from a videographer to a filmmaker. I see so many phenomenally shot films, wedding films especially, where I want to see more of a scene. They just feel like a montage of shots put together. Sometimes, they kind of have, obviously it's a wedding, so they have some cohesion, but they just feel like segmented out. What I love to do when I'm shooting especially, but also when you come back to the editing process, is to create scenes. The word for this on a film set would be called coverage. So a lot of times they'll shoot, a master shot, which would be like a wide shot of a scene, and then they'll move in and they'll shoot close-ups of each actor or actress who are having dialogue or something. Then they'll shoot some specialty shots, like they might shoot hands, like to give some tension and energy to the scene. Sometimes they'll shoot a specialty shot during the scene that they're going to cut to, like a dolly shot or something like that. So again, creating scenes in coverage, it's really hard to do on a wedding because it's not controlled like a movie set, obviously. But, if you have this in your mind as you're going through the day, I think it's really going to change how you shoot something. I'll give you a couple examples of this. This is one where it's just the couple, and thankfully when you have just the couple, you do have a little more control. Especially if you're working with a photographer who's really cool, like that allows you to do some directing and stuff, that helps a lot too. So I'm gonna just kind of play this, and then I'm gonna play it again and kind of talk about the coverage as well. I'm gonna play it just through once. Yeah, and I shot all this with one camera. So there wasn't multiple cameras on the scene. It was just one camera, but I was thinking about the coverage as I shot it. So, as soon as he was playing the piano, obviously I want to establish, their relationship to each other. She's sitting there, then cutting back to a closer shot of that, then to a close-up of his face, and then of course a close-up of her crying. And you just I could have shot that in one master gimbal shot. I could have. And I could have even moved in to see her reaction. But I feel like entering into a scene with coverage and editing is so helpful. And it will really set your films apart from just being a montage of shots to really having like these moments that you can kind of like sit in and it kind of create a scene. And I think that's really something that's going to set your stuff apart. Here's another example. This is not a couple shot. This is just a bride getting ready. But again, I'm kind of trying to show you guys how I enter into a scene here, just kind of with a wide shot, and then a close-up of her ring, and then her initials, then clocks, then showing her relationship to the clocks, and then going back to her hair. So again, just trying to create these scenes and stitching these things together. And it is really difficult, I will say, we don't have a controlled environment on a wedding. So just do your best. And I think if you have that mindset going into it, it's really going to be helpful. One of the other things that I think is really important is our directing. Because we are directors. on a film too, on a wedding film. We're not just simply there to shoot, record, or push record. I mean, that's not what we're there for. The couples need some direction. These are not trained actors, but they need direction to authenticity. Like, they don't need you to direct them to something that's uncomfortable for them, you know? And this even goes back to like some of the stuff we talked about in pre-production. This goes back to learning about your couple. This goes back to following them on social media, seeing who these people are, you know? So I think this is one of those things where you really, and I don't want to be too theoretical, but you really have to feel this one out. I mean, you have to be fully present with that couple. You don't just focus on the cool shots, but focus on their energy, their chemistry as much as you can, because I think this is really going to help you once you're actually able to direct them. And even when you're directing little things, just knowing how to communicate to them. Are they someone who needs more direct communication? Are they someone who needs just more of a gentle communication? You know, I mean, just things like that. I mean, we're so much more than just people who take a camera and push record, you know? And so I think, just even embodying that and knowing that about yourself is going to help you a lot. So this is just a couple things that I do when I'm directing a couple. You know, these two, you saw them on the video earlier. They were fun. They were sweet. They were all the things. They were fantastic. And so, I think in this case, I said, whisper, your favorite dessert, sexy in her ear, and she started, laughing. Sometimes they just want to make out, which is cool. Sometimes you're in this really cool place and they're just walking and looking at each other, Sometimes they get on a swing and get more adventurous, And then, of course, sometimes they're just hanging out and talking and laughing. And then there's the epic kiss, which is always cool, if they want to do that. So again, every couple is different. Every wedding is different. Every situation is different, what you can do, but always direct towards their personality. Don't try to direct away from it. And it is hard because sometimes photographers have, and I don't mean to bash any photographers in the room. I apologize in advance. But I mean, some photographers will try to direct couples out of their authenticity. Like, I had a photographer I was working with this last year, and you could tell she wanted it to look like all her other weddings, but this couple, that wasn't where they were at. And it was really frustrating because I had gotten to know this couple along, over the course of the pre-production process and stuff, and it was just driving me nuts the whole day. I was like, just let them be them, And so I think that's one of the things that's really going to help your films, especially when you're working with couples, but even with parents and stuff too. I mean, that stuff really makes a difference. Another thing I really like to do, and this might be a little controversial for photographers in the room because I'm pulling them away from the session, but I do sometimes show shots to my couples during the shoot. This not only establishes trust in you, like, oh, wow, that's an awesome shot. So when you're telling me to do this and this, it's gonna look like this. Wow, because they're trying their best, but like if you can start to really, even during the shoot, even build that trust and relationship even more, they're going to like be more open to your direction and you directing them. So I think that's something I like to do every once in a while. Sometimes it's such a rush shoot, you can't do that. But if you can, just like real quickly, just show them a shot or two that really excites you. And honestly, like I wear my emotions on my sleeve when I'm shooting a wedding. Like, if I think a shot is really cool, I'm gonna like say, wow, because, they're gonna feed off that energy too. Like, they're gonna get excited if you're excited, and hopefully you're genuinely excited. I know I am. So, definitely, even when you're shooting that coverage, sometimes I even say, hey, I'm shooting a close-up on his hand now. So they're aware of what I'm shooting. Because, even actors on a film set, they're always, asking, hey, where's this framing, because they want to kind of know what their playroom is, what they're doing. So I kind of treat my couple the same way, with the same respect, and just like say, I'm shooting a close-up on his face now and her face, and, close-up on the bouquet and things like that. So they kind of know what I'm doing and stitching together. Another thing that I think, this is more kind of the technical shooting side, not so much the directing side, but something that I've found really helpful for me is photographers tend to like a lot of subtle poses, where the couple's kind of like standing next to each other and they're not doing a lot of movement, but they're kind of like closing their eyes, or they're kissing, or they're, looking at each other. And I don't know about you, but if it's like just a wide shot of that with just them standing there, it's just not interesting to me. and it kind of just looks like a photo, you know? So what I try to do is when the photographer is directing a lot, especially the subtle type of poses, I try to actually shoot a lot of close-ups. So my method is I shoot a ton of close-ups when the photographer is doing most of the directing. Unless, I mean, there's some photographers who do a lot of movement, but like, you know, these very small, subtle type of poses, shoot a lot of close-ups. And then when we get to some of the bigger moves that I can do some directing in, I try to do the wider shots, you know. Again, you know, this is just the way I do it. Obviously, you know, do whatever works for you. But this is something that I found. I just get really bored when I see videos of wide gimbal shots of people just standing on a, you know, a mountaintop or something. I mean, they're pretty shots, but they're just standing there. So anyway, all right. So another thing that I cannot stress enough is audio. I have some funny stories I could talk about audio as it relates to film production. I remember a film that I was working on a really long time ago, probably 12 years ago, and the audio guy was fantastic. One of the best audio guys I've ever worked with. His stuff was just sounded brilliant, just right out of the box. But he was the most annoying guy. Like, seriously, like, he would hear every little thing and just go, like, berserk. And I'm like, dude, like, just chill. But it is so important, and he really took it as it was so important. Obviously, it was his job to take it that important, but, I mean, it's our job, too. So I think that this is something that's going to elevate your films a lot as well. You know, I see a lot of people doing really great work where it's just music-based, and that's cool, but I think to take stuff to the next level emotionally, especially, I think audio is really important. So I'm going to actually show you a scene. It's a little clip. I'm going to show it to you without audio, and then I'm going to show it to you with audio. And I just kind of want to see what you guys think about it. It's pretty good. Let's see it with audio.
Ryan, today is the first day of the rest of our lives, and I can't believe it's finally here. You are my favorite thing in the entire world. You're my warmest smile, my hardest laugh, and my biggest hug. You are my rock, and I strive to be half the person that you are because you are truly one of a kind. I am the luckiest girl in the world, and I can't wait to see you at the end of the aisle.
Chelsea, I'm so excited to see you in a little bit. You're the most beautiful person inside and out, and I know you're going to look amazing. I'm glad I get to spend the rest of my life waking up next to you because I get to wake up and see the most beautiful person in the world every day.
I think it's pretty different. So, yeah. Yeah, just even the emotions of tying together some of the bits like the aisle, showing the visuals of that, him saying she's the most beautiful person in the world while she's putting on her wedding dress, you know, things like that. And even just hearing the voices of the couple, it takes something that's two-dimensional and it creates 3 dimensions. And it really pulls you in much more. So I'm really big on audio. It's so important. I guess a good question, I don't want to get too much in the technical side. I want this to be more of a high-level type of class, but on the technical side, you know, you might be asking, well, how do we capture this audio, you know, without being like obtrusive like the guy I was talking about, you know, who was like going berserk every time a plane flew anywhere from 80 miles away, you know, to where we were. Well, there's a couple things I use that can do that that's really helpful. One is the Tascam DR10L, which I actually am wearing now to record this class. It's really small, it's really helpful. It runs, you know, all day on one battery. It captures fantastic audio. It's a recorder versus a wireless. Wireless is cool, but it always has problems because we use wireless phones. We have, sometimes a church or a ceremony venue you're in has a wireless system that interferes with it. So I always use this because it's basically bulletproof and it's going to work great. So that's the DR10L Tascam. And then I use the DR40 also Tascam. I feel like they should be sponsoring me, but they're not. So I'll just I trust these products and they're really good. So anyway, that's one that I use for like the DJ board or the speaker for the speeches and stuff. You can plug an XLR into it. It's really fantastic. Works really well. The cool thing about this is it records like a kind of a safety track. So you've got like a 12 dB lower safety track. So if like somebody gets really loud like that, it will have a safety track, which is awesome. So if you want to learn more about audio though, honestly, my friends Amber and Garrett Baird are doing a platform class tomorrow in this room at 8 a.m. So you got to be up early. But it's worth it because they're fantastic at audio, and they're going to talk about how it, they're going to go into more depth about how you can craft your story with audio, how to capture it, and all sorts of things. So I definitely recommend checking them out. So audio is important, of course. We saw that. Another thing that's important is lighting. Yeah, lighting. It's just so interesting to me. On a film set, there's not very many films that are shot without any other sort of lighting where it's just naturally lit films. Some films are, but even then it's controlled with reflectors and scrims and silks and all sorts of things. So lighting is one of those things that I feel like will take your films to the next level. It really will. If you've ever seen a movie where there's like a really darkly lit room and it looks really good, it's because it's not darkly lit. It's actually lit a lot, but then it's created to look darkly lit. So I think one of the most obvious places we can start with our lighting is the reception, because it's usually this super dark place. One of the lights I use for that is the Core Torch LED. These are really small. They're like that big. They're tiny little guys, but they pack a punch. And these are what I use to light the receptions, usually one on either end of a dance floor. Sometimes I'm moving around them a little bit for the speeches if they're somewhere else. I put them on like 13-foot stands and just shoot them as bright as I can and call it a day. And they run 3 hours on a battery, which is awesome. Usually that lasts for most of the dancing. I'm going to give you an example of a reception where I have a shot where there's no lights on, none of my lights. It's just whatever's in the venue and the DJ, and then you'll see it transition into a shot with my lights on. I might run this clip a couple times because it's short. No lights, and then lights. Literally black. I mean, obviously I didn't change my settings. I could have bumped my ISO a whole bunch and, made it like this grainy, ugly image that you could actually see something, but I didn't really want to do that, so it's just literally black, and then let there be light. So this is another little sequence from that same wedding. You can see my light there on the stand, shooting down. And again, it looks like a dimly lit dance party, but you can see people, And it's edgy and it's fun, and I don't know, it just looks a lot better than if you don't have lights. And it's one of those things that you can do like literally tomorrow. You can start lighting your scenes and it'll just elevate your films to another level. Another thing, sometimes the light you have to work with is actually the one that's hanging up in the sky, the sun. A lot of times it's not your lights, it's the light up in the sky. And so a lot of times you'll walk in, I know this for me, you'll walk into a room, the bride or the groom will be in this really horrible lit spot. And you're looking around and you're like, oh, why did they decide to go there? And I actually will give you an example of that. This is from that wedding earlier. This is where she started out getting ready. And I was like, this is awful. So let's move her toward the sun and a window. And it looks a lot better. Again, this is one of those things, just like one little change can just make a huge amount of difference from something that's kind of okay, borderline ugly in my opinion, to something that's really beautiful. So lighting is really important. So that's kind of a couple things about production. Obviously, we could probably go on a lot longer than that, but we only have an hour and a half, and I want to save time for Q&A as well. So that's kind of the production side of a film. Now we're going to get into one of my favorite parts of filmmaking, and that is post-production. I started out, before I ever did any writing and directing, I started out as an editor for films. And it was so cool because I got to start on the back end of it and then work my way to the front end and just see how the pieces came together. You can save so many weddings with a good edit. It's true. I have had weddings where I leave and I'm like, what did I just film? And I'm like, I have nothing to work with. I have no audio. I have no good shots of the couple together. And I sit down in the edit and I'm like, wait a minute, this works here, this works there. And it's just, if you would spend a good amount of time on editing and really, really work on it, you can do some amazing things. You really can. This is where it all comes together. And again, all the parts of this process are super important, but this is really where it all comes together. So let's dive into it. The first 30 seconds of your video are probably your most important of the entire video. It's pretty common to know that on social media platforms, most people do not watch anything more than 30 seconds long, sometimes even less than that. So you literally have that much time to engage them, to get them interested in what you're doing. And even for the couple, those 30 seconds are important. I remember a wedding a couple years ago where I didn't take my own advice. I should have taken my class. And I actually tried to take a wedding that was very romantic and gentle and soft and make it this edgy, like flash cutty, crazy dance montage thing, which I did do that in that video you saw, but it fit them. But it did not fit this couple. And I sent it to the bride, and she wasn't really that happy about it. And I realized that it wasn't that she had notes throughout the film about the film. And I realized immediately it wasn't all these notes about the film. It was just that first 30 seconds that really threw her off. As I kind of, walked it back, I said, give me a few minutes, or not a few minutes, I think I said a few days. I think I did it in a few minutes because I knew how to fix it. But I told her, let me send you something. And I just changed the stuff in the first 30 seconds. I didn't touch anything else that she talked about. And as soon as I did that, she was like, oh, this is amazing. So really, that first 30 seconds is important. And make sure it fits your couple too. Because again, if you're trying to force something, if you're trying to be edgy and hip or whatever you're trying to be, don't project yourself onto the wedding and onto the project, but really let it speak to you instead of you speaking to it. So I'm going to give you an example of a few different ones. I'm going to try to comment on these as they go. They're going to go a little quick because it's 30 seconds. But I'm going to try to comment a little bit on these, hopefully over the audio. So here we go. This one, the music kind of had this sound like it was in reverse. So I kind of did like all these events, including the audio in reverse. Which was kind of fun. And the couple was very fun, and I thought this would really fit their style. And he was crying, which was awesome. So yeah, it was kind of a little reverse thing with the music. This one,
I'm glad that we're finally doing this. I'm
literally
glad you
just
convinced
them
me
talking.
To do this wedding.
And I love how the
was just
army
fine
thing
with
is there
doing it
because he's
just
in the
as a
army,
piece.
so it kind of fits
she was like,
them.
we're doing a wedding.
Shows them right away.
And I was like, okay,
And they're like, he's like, let's do this wedding thing, and then it goes into the wedding. On this one, he's a pastor at this church, and it's really important to them. It's been a church for them for a long time. And I literally just had one shot. I don't usually like starting with a drone shot, but it's just the steeple, one shot.
Your actions leading to this day that you have
really
freely,
slow,
deliberately,
and then back into
chosen each
them
other
in the church, and then showing the name of the church. This one was really cool because I used these bell dings to use for edit points, which was the officiant signaling that the bride was coming out. As soon as I shot that, I knew I was going to use that. And then, of course, the bride comes out. then on this one, I kind of did something fun with the frame size. I also made this black and white because the rooms they were getting ready in were terribly lit. So I kind of stylized it a little bit, which I don't do a lot of black and white. And then I did heartbeats and the frame is extending as she's walking up to him.
Marriage was God's idea.
And by the time she actually gets up to him for the first look, the frame will be fully extended.
God said it is
a little more than 30 seconds.
for the men to be alone. So God took the initiative by creating the first woman, Eve, and God brought her to Adam.
And then this one is self-explanatory.
This is Hurricane Florence, which is bearing down on the Carolina coast.
The storm is, as big as both North and South Carolina combined right now.
Millions are bracing now for this monster hurricane.
The wedding happened during the weekend of the hurricane. And then I had the good fortune that the maid of honor had something in her speech.
I think John's mom said it best. She had said that rain usually means good luck on your wedding day, so a hurricane must mean really good luck.
So there you go. That's a couple, openings that I do. So yeah, I try to make every single one of my films have a really unique open. Sometimes, if the film doesn't lend itself to something super out of the box, just a few beauty shots of the couple. I opened one film with a silhouette of them dancing. Just try to do something that's visually interesting. Try to get audio in there as soon as you can, especially too, because that's going to bring people in right away. So really, that first 30 seconds is so important. Let's talk about pacing. Pacing is something that writers use. Fiction writers, screenwriters, editors, all sorts of people. This really talks about the rhythm of an edit and the flow of an edit. This talks about building moments, anticipation, things like that, holding on shots, and how long you hold on shots. Again, I don't want, this seems like a cop-out to say it, but this is something you have to feel. Sometimes what I like to do when I'm working on an edit is actually listen or watch the edit back with no audio at all, just silent. So I can feel how the shots cut from shot to shot to shot. I've been doing this ever since I started editing, and it really helps me to know if a shot's too long or too short. Sometimes we get so caught up in cutting on the beat of music, and sometimes it doesn't work, Sometimes it's almost like too obvious. So really, if you mute everything and just look at the visuals, and just feel that out, I think that's gonna really help your pacing. I'm gonna give you one example of that. I love first looks and I love building anticipation for those. So I'm gonna give you an example of a first look and how I pace this out. So yeah, it just gives you an idea. And when I was using the shot of him, I really thought about cutting back to her again, like before he said the wow, but it just didn't feel right. I just felt like staying on him and just hanging and letting him process seeing her and letting the audience process that at the same time was something that would just really work for that edit. So that was kind of an example of that. So again, pacing is so important for your films. It really is. I feel like sometimes in general we have a tendency to overcut, especially if we're making like a highlight film that's 5 to 10 minutes long. It's like you want to get everything in there, right? So I feel like we just like cut, especially because it's trendy now to cut really fast. I do it too, so I can't bash it too much. There's a book called In the Blink of an Eye, an edit or a perspective on film editing. It's one of the best theoretical books on editing you'll ever read. I highly recommend getting it. It's from Walter Murch, and he is an editor of films such as Apocalypse Now, The English Patient, Cold Mountain, and a bunch of other films. He's brilliant. I have read the book many, many times, and this is a quote from that book I think is really helpful. It says, an overactive editor who changes shots too frequently is like a tour guide who can't stop pointing things out And up there we have the Sistine ceiling, and over here we have the Mona Lisa. And by the way, look at these floor tiles. If you are on a tour, you do want a guide to point things out for you, of course. But some of the time, you just want to walk around and see what you see. People will eventually feel resentful from the constant pressure of his or her hand on the backs of their necks. So as an editor, you don't want to force your audience, but you also want to guide them. So it's really it's a balance, you know? And I think that quote really rings true to me, and I think, you know, I need to keep coming back to that as well and just make sure that I let things breathe. I feel like even with audio sometimes, we can let things get too bunched together where there's just too much audio, and it's like, you know, before you've processed what you've heard, you're on to the next thing, you know? So it's like you really want to let things breathe and let things go at the pace that they need to go. We're going to get to the next point, which is a topic that's really important. It's called the cutting room floor. So I feel like this is something that happens a lot. Actually, I used to do it a lot, where I would feel like I had to get everything from the wedding into the video. So if 6 people had speeches, I felt like all 6 people needed to be in the video, whether that was them actually talking or if their speech was terrible, them just looking like they're talking. And then you have a person talking and not hearing it, and it's weird. So what I've started to do is really just use what works for the film. I'll give you an example of this. There was this beautiful moment on a film I shot last year where all the bridesmaids were sitting there, hanging out, eating Chick-fil-A in this room as they were getting ready. And it was just like the sweetest moment. But it just didn't work for the film. And I even told the bride that. I told her she should get the raw footage so she could see that. And she actually did that, and she really loved it, but it just didn't work. And if you've built enough trust in your couples, and they know that you've taken the time to know their story, I will tell you this: there's been times where I've sent a film off, and I'm like, they're going to notice that such and such a speech is in there, and I just second guess myself. Never. They if the film works, they're not going to notice that something's missing. I don't put in cake cutting all the time. I don't put in bouquet tosses all the time. Sometimes, honestly, I don't even put in always the gifts that they're exchanging, because sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes it works beautifully, but it doesn't always. If it's something that they've really told me is super important, it carries a lot of weight for me, because obviously they're the client and it is their story. So I do want to, respect that and honor that. But at the same time, if it just doesn't work and I feel like I'm, putting a square peg into a round hole, I will cut it out. And even when there's a shot that I think is awesome, like on set and during production, it's just amazing. If it doesn't work in the film, it's gone. And Walter Murch, again, just talking about him, he actually had this comment, and I'm paraphrasing it, but he basically said, it's good when an editor is not there because they're basically seeing it for the first time. Now, a lot of you will be not only editing but also shooting, so that's a little bit of an advantage in that you know what you shot, but it's also a disadvantage because sometimes you'll try to force things into your films that don't work because you're so excited about them. And I understand that, right? It's the same thing with writers. When a writer hands a script over to a director to shoot a film and things get cut out or changed, they feel, they just don't feel good about that. But if it works better for the final product, the final piece, the final film, then you gotta do it. You gotta leave things on the cutting room floor. Just to give you an example of this though, I know that sometimes we give ourselves a hard time, and sometimes even clients are like, wait, we're getting a 5-minute film after a whole wedding day? What's the deal, right? Well, this is a stat that should encourage you. The average ratio for a theatrical feature is around 20-1. That means if a movie is 90 minutes long, there's 1,800 minutes of raw footage. Yeah. So considering that's a controlled environment with a script that's been approved for the most part, we should give ourselves a lot of grace in this area. Because even if you were on, say, an 8-hour film shoot, right, for a wedding, if you end up with 3 hours of footage from an 8-hour coverage, which is about right. If you're shooting with a couple different shooters, you might have a little more than that. That equates to 180 minutes of footage. So even at the 20-to-1 ratio, that's a 9-minute film at the most. So, again, even educating your clients on this stuff is really important. And I've talked to people before, and they've asked me about that. And I'm like, look, sometimes on a single day of a film production, you're getting 2 minutes of usable footage. We're going to get 10 minutes on this wedding, So again, just go quality over quantity. Always go quality over quantity. And this concept leads me to my final point, which is when you sit back and the film gives you goosebumps. This is the best feeling in the world, especially if you've been so close to a project. It's actually harder for a project to give you emotion if you're closer to it than if you're further away from it. So if it's giving you some kind of emotion, it's bringing something up for you, that's really important. What I like to do is I like to actually finish the film, export a file, play it on my TV, and my fiance and I will watch it, and we'll just kind of let it just like hit us as if we're watching it for the first time. Getting away from that small monitor, on my editing software, and really just like you see, not only do you see some of the technical stuff you might have missed, but you also just get a whole new experience in a different context where you can really just let it wash over you. And there's, I don't think there's any like formula for this because every wedding's different, every story is different. Again, I don't want to use that as a cop-out, but it's very much a feeling thing. However, I will give you something that's helped me as I've kind of worked this process, and it's called the Rule of 3. Now, I mentioned Walter Murch before, and in his book, he actually has something called the Rule of 6, so I kind of, took it from that. And he has these 6 rules of where he makes an edit or what shot he uses on a film. And he talks about the first or the last 3 aren't really applicable to weddings because it talks about like eye lines and like, spatial context of where the characters are and movement in the frame and things like that. They're not super, into what we're doing necessarily. But I think 3 of those things are really important, and I think will help us as we're editing our films. The least important thing, it's not important, but it's the least important, is rhythm. We talked about pacing earlier. This is basically that. Pacing is more of a general overall thing. Rhythm is more shot to shot. So I'll give you an example. Say you have a shot where your character is on one side of the frame, and then all of a sudden you cut to another shot and the other character is on the same side. That's going to be disorienting. The rhythm of that shot to shot visually even is just going to kind of not be good. So you want to try to find a shot where, you have a character on one side of the frame and then a character on the other side of the frame if you can, or something else. So that just talks about the rhythm and pacing. Obviously, we talked about if a cut is too fast, if a cut is too slow, things like that. So that's the rhythm, and that's something you just have to feel out. Like I said, muting your sound during that can help you with that and things like that. The second most important and also the second least important is story. You might be surprised that it's the second, but it is actually the second. The storyline is important, obviously, because does a shot advance the story? Am I just shooting and showing details just for the sake of it? I'm not trying to create an aesthetic environment. I'm just shooting it. I've been in situations before where there's 1 billion decorations, like literally 1 billion. And I cover them all, I shoot them all, but I get back to the editing and I'm like, I don't want to sit here for 30 seconds or even 20 seconds just decoration after decoration after decoration, because this is a film about 2 people, not about their flowers. Now their flowers are part of the aesthetic of the day and things like that, but it's not about the flowers. So, the story really kind of changes what you do based on that a lot of times. And even how you flow one scene into another. We saw earlier how the audio matched the visuals of the aisle, and how the audio matched the visuals of her getting into the dress. So even the audio will dictate the shots you use in the storyline. But the most important thing on a shot or an edit, by far, is motion. And this is where the goosebumps come in. Emotion is what should drive every single one of your edits. It shouldn't be like you feeling obligated to show a certain speech. It should be about the emotion of the story. I'm actually going to give you an example of this instead of talking about it more, because there's a lot of times where we prepare as well as we can, and we get in this situation where this moment unfolds and it's just not the most ideal situation, whether the lighting is not ideal, whether the audio is not ideal. And I'll preface this by saying this room was very cramped that this happened in, and it was not the most ideal, and I went back and forth on whether to use it at all, because the photographer, bless him, he's great to work with, but he was snapping crazy, and you could hear his shutter constantly. But the emotion outweighed all the technical elements, and the story also outweighed all the technical elements. And even the rhythm of it wasn't how I wanted it to be. It was a little choppy, but I think you'll understand what I mean when you watch this.
My dearest Whitney, look at you. What a beautiful bride you are. This day is the day all mothers dream of when they first hold that precious bundle of joy. There was another person who cherished and loved you to the very core of his being. You called him your hero, your father. I know if he were here today, he would beam with joy, getting to witness his baby girl marry the one whom her soul loves. God had other plans for you and Papa on this wedding day. However, there's an old tradition for brides to the rhyme of something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. Papa is here with you today, bringing with him the part of the tradition, something blue. Located under the train of your dress is a piece of his heart in blue to foster the old tradition of something blue. He will be here today walking you down the aisle to give you to the one your soul loves.
Those camera clicks drive me crazy. But that moment, I mean, it happened really fast too, and I didn't even expect that. Bride was really reserved like the whole day, and I didn't even expect the emotions from her, or even her mom. They had been very reserved through the whole process. And when that happened, I was just like, I have to start the film with that. And that's actually the very beginning. That's the first 30 seconds going back to that of the whole film, which really just, goosebumps. So anyways, that's just something to keep in mind as you're editing, as you're crafting your films. Always lead with that emotion, then follow that up with story, and then follow that up with rhythm. Sometimes the rhythm doesn't work, sometimes the story doesn't work, and sometimes it's just the emotions. And always lead with that, because we're making films that should move people. Love should move people, and that's the kind of films we're making. So anyway, today, just to recap, we talked about pre-production. Again, having a great plan going into your wedding is so important. I think it's just as important as the other stages of production. And I think, what we do on a wedding film definitely reflects what, Hollywood films do as well. And I think it looks a little bit different for us, but I think it's just as important, and it can be just as time consuming, if not more, actually. So don't forget that pre-production. Then we talked about production, which is, of course, when we're at the wedding and we're trying to shoot that as best we can. We talked about some technical aspects such as lighting and audio and why those are so important. We talked about the cast of characters and how that even reflects a film as well. And we talked about directing and why that's so important. And I definitely think, even if you're not comfortable being outspoken with people, practice on your friends, go out and direct your friends and shoot some stuff with your friends just to get a feel for it, if you can. Because I think that's so important, if you can direct your couple, and even sometimes, you know, the other bridal party members or family members. And then we talked about my favorite, post-production. Again, you know, even if some of the things before post-production go south, even if you hardly got to talk to the couple at all during pre-production, even if production was a nightmare for you, post-production can change a lot. It really can change a lot. And I think with those 3 phases of production, if you're really honing in on these things, you'll be creating not wedding videos. You won't be a wedding videographer, but you'll be creating wedding films, and you will be a wedding filmmaker. And I really think that that distinction is something that your clients are going to appreciate. You're going to be able to do less weddings and charge more, and you're going to be able to really take your time on each of them. And I think it's going to be really helpful along the way. So anyway, I now have about 20 minutes for Q&A. I like Q&A a lot because then it's more interactive, and I like to go back and forth and make this real personal for you guys, kind of like the wedding films I make. So you can ask me anything you want, anywhere. Yes?
I had a question on lighting, especially at the reception. Not so much the how-to of it, but just the complaints. I haven't received a complaint, but I always worry about changing the mood of, you know, by adding lights to the dance floor, and it's like, the shot's important, but I just anticipate that one of these days someone's just going to really get upset. Have you dealt with that, or how do you?
Yeah, there's this venue in Nashville that I don't ever want to work at again, that they complain all the time, and they are filmmakers' worst nightmare. Like, all of my colleagues in Nashville do not like working there because they're very particular about that. What I try to do is I have a remote control on my lights, so I can turn them on and off when I need them to. So I try to run them only when I'm shooting, because obviously, like, sometimes open dancing is like 3 hours long. You know, you don't need to shoot 3 hours. That's just going to be more footage you have to edit out. So I try to just turn them on when I need them. And I also really try to tell the couple in advance what I'm going to do. And if I've had complaints from other people other than the couple, I go to them first, because we've talked about it. They know what they want. They know they want stuff that they've seen that I've shown them. And they'll kind of vouch, you know, for me. Again, there's some exceptions, like that venue I mentioned. So what I did in those situations, at first that venue said no light stands. So I actually brought an assistant just for the reception and had him hold a light off to the side in a balcony, and then they got mad about that. So then the next time I went there, because I had 3 weddings booked at this venue before I knew about their situation with lighting, which was a struggle. So then what I did is I actually used an on-camera light, and I just turned it to the lowest setting, and I did the best I could. I just shot a lot of close-ups, and that was kind of what I could do. I think it still turned out okay. It's not like what I wanted, but you know, there's some ways around that. But again, even just getting with your couple, kind of giving them, you know, and some couples even ask about lighting. And, you know, I even talk to, like, the DJ sometimes if they have their own lights. I'm like, you know, I'm going to turn these on. I have had a few DJs say the dance floor won't be filled if you have your lights on. And then I turn them off, and it's still not filled. So, you know, that's also incorrect. And actually, I find that people really get drawn to the light because it kind of creates a spotlight effect. And people actually even like that, especially when they're ready to party. So anyway, just, you know, I mean, the problem is every situation is so different. So, like, you know, the way you dress it each time is going to be a little different. The best suggestion I can make is just get with your couple, have them vouch for you during the time, you know, that if that comes up, and try to just turn them off when you're not using them. That also saves your battery, which is awesome. So win-win. Yeah.
Sometimes you can also do the young ladies' comments. Sometimes you add gels to your lights too.
Yeah, that's true. Well, actually, yeah. So my lights are adjustable from like daylight to like tungsten, because I don't want a daylight light in a tungsten environment where it's like this white light and then it's like these other yellow lights. Like you want to try to balance them as much as you can. So yeah, that's definitely something to look at when you're looking at lighting, is to make sure you get something that's adjustable, or something that's, especially if you're using it just for the reception, try to get something that's probably more tungsten, like 3200 Kelvin, around that range, because then it'll just kind of like work better with what's the environmental lighting. That's a good point.
That torch that you talked about, that's the one you use, the core torch LED?
Yeah, the core torch LED you can adjust from like daylight 5600 Kelvin to 3200 Kelvin tungsten. Yeah, it's remote control too, yeah. And it's cool because you can use one remote control for like, I think, up to like 16 lights. So like I just have one remote control for both of the lights, and you can adjust the brightness and you can turn them on and off and all sorts.
Like control them separately?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can put them on different channels. So yeah, it's really awesome. So, go ahead.
How are you playing your speakers?
Yeah, so basically what I try to do, and this is tricky because, you know, sometimes they move around and stuff, but I try to get with whoever the MC is or the DJ is and say, hey, I need them here in this pocket of light. And I try to get them to be in the middle of the dance floor if I can. If they don't, I try to run around and get a backlight on them, and I'll always have an on-camera light just for, you know, the chance that they're gonna move to a different spot, and I'll give them a little soft key with that. And then you know, it kind of fills them, and then I'll have a backlight from one of my stands usually. That's what I try to do. Speeches are hard to light. I know some people use mic stands, so then, you know, they're in one particular spot. I've tried to do that, and then sometimes they pulled the mic from the mic stand and walked around. So it's just, I try to give as much light in an area as possible so they have a play area and they stay in a light, you know, lit area. But even then, you sometimes just have to wing it. Like it's a wedding, so hopefully that helps. Yeah.
So going back to that analogy of working like a film production. A film production, you're working with a team of experts and they're all specific areas.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a solo shooter? If you have a second shooter, what are your expectations for them going into the day?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So on most of the films I worked on, I was wearing many hats because they were mostly independent films, you know, lower budget films. They weren't, you know, super high budget films where, you know, like you said, everybody's an expert in a specific field. So I don't really work with many second shooters. I solo shoot 95% of my weddings. All the ones in these examples were solo shot. So I'm just, you know, the good thing about, you know, a wedding is that, you know, you don't have to have costume design. You don't have to have makeup design. You know, usually you have a makeup artist there, so they're filling that role. You know, you're focused on, you know, mostly the technical side and the directorial side. So like, you know, you're focusing on the lighting, you're focusing on the audio, and also the kind of the emotions and the shots you're shooting. So you're kind of in the role of like an audio tech / DP / director, you know, in a way. So, and then the pre-production side, you're kind of in a producer role, you know. So, you know, if I had to give you an answer of what a second shooter's responsibility would be cocktail hour, or a family photo session, because I don't really particularly like shooting either of those things or find them that compelling with the emotional side of the edit. So, so if I had a second shooter, I'd probably send them to shoot those. Hopefully no future second shooters see this video. Yes?
I was really impressed with your color grading throughout the entire highlight film and storytelling film. And I was wondering what your tips and tricks are for making sure that they're colored. Because like, you spend a lot of your time in post to make sure that colors dialed in. Or are you just shooting to a profile like you pretty much set with and then go and set it at the end?
Yeah, that's a good question. He asked about the color grade and how what I'm doing when that comes around. Yeah, so one of the biggest things for me, and I struggle with this sometimes, honestly, is like the skin tones. I really look at those a lot. And I'm, you know, some environments with mixed lighting are so hard, you know. So I try to do my best. One trick I will tell you, and it's interesting because I was talking to I had a mentorship session, which I do like one-on-one mentorships. I was talking to this gal a few weeks ago, and she was talking to me about, she was trying to adjust her white balance, like as she went, like even in the same environment, and to try to dial it in to be better. And I was like, don't do that. Like even if it's really bad when you start, if you've shot a bunch of shots, like leave it there, because when you're in post, it's going to be a nightmare to try to fix those up, you know? So I really suggest, if you're in an environment that's mixed lighting, you know, just, you know, go ahead and do as best you can to dial that Kelvin in, but leave it set. Like, don't change it at all unless you just shot one shot and then change it. But like, if you shot a bunch of stuff, it is a nightmare to try to deal with that. Also, shoot with the same company cameras. I've tried to use like multiple cameras in a shoot, and it's just a nightmare to try to, and I know there's some people out there that are doing a good job with it, where they might have a gimbal camera on, you know, that's a different company make, and then the rest are the same. But for me, I just want to shoot with one because everything kind of matches really well just out of the box. I use like a very like minor LUT, like very minor, and then I kind of go in and fix white balance when I need to, brighten some shots up when I need to, darken some shots when I need to, you know, very minor color correction. I try not to do a lot of color grade. I kind of toyed with that a couple years ago where I did a heavy color grading, but I feel like I like the natural look a little bit more, and still stylized, but not like over stylized. Yeah.
Sorry, just did you mainly shoot in like a log format and then do that kind of LUT, or are you still locking into a pretty high set profile and then just committing to it?
Yeah, I lock into like on the GH5, which I shoot on, I lock into like a natural profile, which is, and I do like dial the contrast back, so it's a little, it gives me a little more play area as far as like, you know, the exposure and stuff like that. But I don't shoot in log. I think it's too much work. That's a bad thing to say, but I just think that it's like what you gain, like percentage wise, is not going. I'd rather focus on that story stuff, you know. Like I'd rather focus on that kind of stuff than shooting in log and then going through that whole process. Especially when I feel like the percentage of what you're gaining, especially when you're delivering like on the web and stuff, which you're going to lose a lot of that anyway. So I would just prefer to shoot in something that's, and then if you're delivering raw footage, that's another thing, because I offer raw footage. You don't want to give them log raw footage. That would look terrible. And you don't want to go through and color grade every single one of your shots either. So, yeah. Anything else? I think we can do like two more. Go ahead.
Do you outsource any of your shooting and editing? Like, how do you make sure like they're on the same page and they don't edit into your Brandon's style?
So rephrase that question for me. Sorry.
Like, do you outsource?
Oh no, I do not outsource. No, this process is very hard to follow if you outsource. Honestly, like, and I know some people that do outsourcing really well, but it's really hard to do well. And a lot of times you're getting cookie cutter wedding videos, and I call them videos because of that, because you're just not able to get as personal of a touch on them. Some people have teams, you know, of shooters where they'll even introduce them to the couple, and that's a good way of doing it. But if you're outsourcing your shooting and then you're editing and all this kind of stuff, I mean, it's really hard to get that personal touch to it. If you're doing it consistently with the same team, I think you can do that. Like, I know some people where they have a team of shooters and a team of editors, and they're kind of consistently doing it. But even then, I feel like it's really a personal thing. And I don't know, I'm a bit of a maverick, so I kind of like to be out there and just be doing all the jobs. My favorite director, his films aren't my favorite, but he's my favorite director is Robert Rodriguez, because he wears all the hats. And literally, you know, he's writing it, he's scoring it, he's shooting it, he's editing it. And I don't know, I've always felt really, you know, just connected to him. And that's the kind of style I like. And, you know, as far as the production process goes. So, you know, that's kind of what I follow in this too. So, yes?
You mentioned that there's some festivities that you don't always include in the final piece. Can you give an example of that conversation of building that trust when you're having that conversation with a client about that?
Yeah, you know, I don't even necessarily bring that up to them, like, unless they ask about it. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like the work, it should speak for itself in a way. It's like, you know, if they're hiring me and trusting me with their wedding, you know, if they ask later on down the road, I might just mention it didn't fit, you know. And I don't think I can even think of a time I've had a couple I think one time a bride about 3 years ago said, hey, could we get a piece from my dad's speech in there? And I kind of was at first like, I think it's good, as is. But I was able to fulfill her request by literally like adding, congratulations to the bride and groom, and transitioned into like a dancing sequence or something like that, And so I do try to cater to the client. Like I don't just dismiss them completely, like, cause that's not, that's not what we're doing. We're still, even though we're trying to make beautiful films, we're still trying to make something they really love and speaks to them, and embodies their entire wedding and their relationship. So, if I ever had to have that conversation, I do my best to cater to them if I can. If I really feel strongly about it, I may just say it just didn't fit in the flow, and you can get the raw footage, which, a lot of people have done that. So I'm sorry we're out of time for questions. I'm really sorry. We're coming up on the end here. I actually also have some giveaways. So I use Soundstripe, which is, in my opinion, the best music licensing company on the planet. You can use this offer code too to get 15% off any membership. And I also want to give away one of these memberships as well. So if you want to be entered to win this, there's some sheets of paper in the back over there, and there's pens next to it. If you can jot down your email address, and I will later randomly, I promise, we can even film it. I will randomly select some winners from there. And then I also have giveaways from, this is actually really cool. Photo flash drive. I don't usually get excited about delivering products to people that are not just like a USB drive or a digital file, but this thing is really cool. I want to show it to you. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it's really cool. You can brand it with your company, which is awesome. And then you open it, and this is the video we were playing earlier. And you can just play the video on there, which is awesome, right? So I think I'm going to start upselling this because it's so cool, and it comes in a really nice case, and it's branded, which is awesome, which keeps your brand in front of them when they have friends at their house, and this is on their coffee table. Oh, who did your wedding video? Well, there it is, What's that? The cost, I think on that is $100. Which is really affordable too. And like I said, I'm not a big pusher of products. I don't like doing that very often. But today I did the Tascam recorders, and this is really cool too. So I think it might be something to check out. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. My voice is going. So have a great rest of the show.